Hi everyone, Meg Houghton here with the Center for Students with Disabilities at Durham College. I want to share with you briefly some information about the difference between the universal design model and the accommodation model. As you probably know, thinking back just to your own post-secondary experiences, there's a large over-reliance in post-secondary on the traditional teaching and learning model. What that means with respect to the way we set up instructional delivery is that there's an over-reliance on lecture and hard copy textbook. It also means that there's an over-reliance in this model on timed testing to ask students to evidence their learning. So what we may not have thought about, though, is what are the secondary skills that we require students to have in order to be successful in this kind of teaching and learning model. And essentially, there's a very wide range of skills that are required to be successful in this model. You need only think back to your own 3-hour lectures to know that you've got to be able to sit there for 3 hours, eliminate any distractions, focus, stay awake, hear, read, take notes, and listen simultaneously. There's a whole host of skills that are required in this model. Now, if I'm a student with a disability and I have a mobility concern, a distractibility issue, this is probably going to be a little bit more difficult for me. And so this is where accommodations come into place in the post-secondary system, is students with disabilities need to come to a CSD or a disability office and indicate what is required essentially to fit them into this model. Now, this is less than ideal, obviously, for two main reasons. From a student perspective, it requires them to go through the indignity of revealing to the institution, among their most personal information, what is their disability, what is the nature of the disability, and what is the impact of that disability in a learning environment. And this is where accommodations come in. Many of you have received accommodation letters from the Center for Students with Disabilities outlining what the accommodations are. These accommodations would be in place for students who have a wide variety of disabilities, anything from a brain injury or a processing issue, a learning disability, a sensory disability, maybe the student is blind or low vision, deaf or hard of hearing, or a chronic medical condition, or a mobility impairment. And so you might get accommodation letters that relate to a whole host of disabilities. It's really not at all ideal for students to have to reveal this information about themselves to the institution because their courses are designed in such a way that didn't necessarily consider their needs on the front end. From a faculty perspective, this is obviously less than ideal because you are needing to design and redesign each course based on what each individual student requires with respect to accommodation. Now, given that roughly 10% of the post-secondary population in Canada presents with a disability, we're no longer in a position where this is a minority issue. Everyone teaching a class should expect that there is going to be at least a handful of students in that class who have a disability, and therefore it calls us to consider during the design phase what the whole spectrum of needs might be with respect to how students learn. So two very easy things that we can do to move forward to the universal design model is adding flexibility on the front end with respect to instructional delivery. If instructors did nothing else but made material available in electronic copy, that would mean that students with a learning disability can go back and review the slides. It means that a student who is deaf and using an interpreter can share those slides with their interpreter in advance of the class so that if there's technical language, they can go over that language with their interpreter in advance. If I'm a student with a generalized anxiety disorder and I have a hard time reducing my anxiety enough that I can concentrate on reading, I can go over and over those notes. If I'm a student with a sensory impairment, I can use specialized software such as text to speech to review not just my textbook which should be available in electronic format, but also the lecture notes in advance of and after the lecture. I thought it might be of interest to you to know that this request for electronic format represents roughly 40% of the total accommodation requests in the Center for Students with Disabilities. So we've got some flexibility on the front end just by producing electronic format. On the back end, where we're asking students to evidence their learning, the more options we can present, the better. So what we're interested in is, has the student learned? So there are many ways for students to evidence that: in a timed test, a written assignment, a group project, a class presentation, some sort of lab. Essentially, presenting options for all students allows students with learning preferences, individual preferences and disabilities to choose the means or the medium by which they will evidence their learning best. Roughly 79% of the accommodation requests that we receive currently in the CSD relate to time testing. This is a model that just doesn't work for a significant number of students with disabilities. So you can see, with just a little bit of flexibility during the design phase for a course, can go a really long way to putting students in a position where they won't even actually need to reveal to the institution that they have a disability, because they will have options built into the course that don't actually create any sort of barrier for them on the front end. I would be more than happy to chat with you at greater length about universal design or accommodation. You can find me in SW116, and I hope you found this little tutorial helpful.